Lots going on with Drew Brees in the last 24 hours.
Sure is.
And in this cancel culture where people take folks and just erase them and everything that they've done right off the planet because of what they've said or how it's difficult to square the circle with what they've said, there's many people that wish to cancel Drew Brees. And I don't think Drew Brees is going to be canceled. Let me just say this about Drew right off the top here. I have known him for, gosh darn it, I guess since I started at NFL Network in 2003. I've been around him and his family, been around him and his community, him in the community. I hosted a charity event for him when he was with the San Diego Chargers back in the day. I've never heard him utter a racist word, never watched him act in any way, shape, or form where he is racist, where he does treat anybody differently because of the color of their skin. I've never seen anything like that, ever. Never sensed it, never thought it, never thought he had it in him, never thought he had that bone in his body. And I know some might say, well, you want him on your show, Rich. Well, he's been on the show. He's always been very open to joining this program, and that may affect the way that I look at him, you could think, but it doesn't. It doesn't. So count me among the many that were sorely disappointed. I was shocked as well. Surprised when he, if you can tee it up for those who may not have seen it, he went on, I guess, a Yahoo Business.
Finance.
Yahoo Finance.
Yahoo Finance. Yeah.
Okay. The exclamation point is silent, right, in the Yahoo?
Correct.
Okay. He went on the Yahoo Finance program and had this exchange.
Well, I will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country. Let me just tell you what I see or what I feel when the national anthem is played and when I look at the flag of the United States. I envision my two grandfathers who fought for this country during World War II, one in the Army and one in the Marine Corps, both risking their lives to protect our country and to try to make our country and this world a better place. So every time I stand with my hand over my heart, looking at that flag and singing the national anthem, that's what I think about. And in many cases, it brings me to tears, thinking about all that has been sacrificed, not just those in the military, but for that matter, those throughout the civil rights movements of the 60s, and everyone and all that has been endured by so many people up until this point. And is everything right with our country right now? No, it's not. We still have a long way to go. But I think what you do by standing there and showing respect to the flag with your hand over your heart is it shows unity. It shows that we are all in this together. We can all do better, and that we are all part of the solution.
Now, that was in response to a question from the host of this program about what happens if players kneel during the national anthem again, as Colin Kaepernick did, based on what's going on in this world. What would the NFL do? And that was Drew's response. And yes, it is always great to call for unity, but that response is wholly unacceptable. He has every right to say it. I mean, in the same way that everybody else has a right to say what they want to say here in this country. He has every right to express it. He has every right to believe it. But in his standing in the NFL and in his locker room and in his community of New Orleans, that's not an acceptable answer. And the reason why, you could seek out the response from many of his colleagues within his own locker room. Malcolm Jenkins in particular was very emotional. And Cameron Jordan speaking to Mike Silver of NFL Media Group, you could seek that out. Michael Thomas, who had a record-setting season catching all the passes from him and Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill. He don't know no better was the tweet that we just showed up there. Many other profane responses. Ed Reed, who might have said it on this show if his phone hadn't dived out. We don't care if you don't agree, and whoever else. How about that? Mike Thomas wrote back to Drew Brees. There were also other responses from white players in the NFL, responses from African-American, Latino members of the New Orleans community, pointing out that that's not acceptable. Wendell Pierce, who's as diehard a Saints celebrity fan that we've ever had on this program, go seek out his thread on Twitter. As Michael Wilbon also said pardon the interruption, we're showing Emmanuel Sanders' tweet calling it ignorant. He's a new member of the New Orleans Saints. Pointing out that there were black Americans who fought alongside Drew Brees' grandfather and came home to considerable racism. The GI Bill let down thousands upon thousands of African American fighters who fought bravely alongside white soldiers in World War II. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on about how the word ignorant, in terms of history, it is. But here's what really particularly disturbed me, let me down, disappointed me. It's that by saying what Brees said in response to the question about what happens if players begin to kneel again, it's as if he did not hear a single word of what was said back in 2017 when Kaepernick was out of football and players were kneeling in response to that and kneeling during the national anthem a year after that Kaepernick was doing so. Didn't at all either hear, absorb, understand, appreciate, listen, that the kneeling during the national anthem had nothing to do with kneeling on the anthem or the flag. It had to do with calling attention to whatever people thought about the anthem or the flag and what it represents in terms of equality. That is something that we need to call attention to, that it's not equal for everybody. And thus the flag doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. As Aaron Rodgers said yesterday on his Instagram, it was never about the anthem, never about the flag. And we all knew it at the time. After President Trump said that all players who knelt should be thrown out of the league, and he used the word sons of bitches in response to them, players had begun to subside in kneeling during the national anthem and when the flag was unfurled prior to a game. And that totally inflamed the situation to the point where players were rightfully outraged and were expressing that's exactly what we're talking about, that sort of intolerance, that sort of one-sided point of view as to what equality means in this country. Not equal to everyone. Players were all like, that's what we're talking about, and began kneeling en masse. I went on NFL Network that next morning next to the rest of us on game day morning and decided, I remember driving to work that day thinking, what am I going to say today? I have to say something, even though I'm a white, 47-year-old Jewish guy. Driving, I had to say something. I had a microphone on me. I just felt I had to say something, and I decided to directly address the camera as I'm doing right now. And I said to the freshly minted president of the United States that, just in case you're wondering why the players are kneeling, let's find out why the players are kneeling. They're not kneeling to protest the military. They're not kneeling to protest those who fight for our freedom. As a matter of fact, they're enjoying the freedom that's been provided by those who fought for it to peacefully protest and bring attention to what is going on in their world, to let everyone know that what this moment represents isn't equal for all, and let's do something about it. We all knew it at the time. So for 3 years later, Drew Brees to answer a question about what if people kneel again in that manner is so beyond the pale. It boggles the mind to, even in this moment when we're seeing protests be violent, to essentially say now the peaceful protest that happens during the national anthem is something I can never agree with. What would we prefer? Somebody taking a knee in peaceful protest or violent protest? Honestly, I can't believe I have to say this into a microphone 3 years later, after this was so obvious to anyone in the NFL. For sure, it might not be to people who weren't paying specific attention to the actual conversations being had in the NFL, where the conversations that the players wanted to have in the NFL, that others were ignoring or using for their personal politics. Like the vice president of the United States at the time going to an Indianapolis Colts game where we absolutely, all of us knew a player on the field was absolutely going to protest peacefully in this manner, in a manner in which the president and the vice president currently say they are for peaceful protests. That actually was happening on the field. We all knew he was going to witness that. And he got up and turned around and walked out. So you're either up for having the conversation and support peaceful protests, or you're not. That's what sorely disappointed me, because Brees is such a team guy. He's a team-oriented guy. He is totally invested in what his brethren are thinking or crying about or loving or needing or wanting, because he's as much of a human being as they are, and he understands that. But to immediately snap into, I stand at attention because my family fought, as if no other families of color fought. And I understand he must know that. And I think that's why when he apologized today and he says it sickens him that people think this of him, I think that's what he's referring to, is that his words are like, you don't know that people of color fought? Of course he knows. He does. But the fact that there's been no absorbing of the conversation of 3 years ago, even today, in light of everything that's going on right now, that's the most disappointing, for me, aspect. And I use words like disappointing as opposed to what you're hearing from others like Ed Reed and Malcolm Jenkins. I'm white, okay? I'm a white guy. I cannot imagine, I can only imagine what a person of color
We saw it in some of those videos.
would say. And so today's team meeting that's going down will be quite something, I imagine, in New Orleans. That will be the mother of all Zooms. Or hopefully they can put the team in the Microsoft team meeting there, because I can't imagine what it's going to be like. And I know Sean Payton said that this team meeting was planned 2 weeks ago, as a 21st century moment there is, responding to a Shooter McGavin tweet.
The parody account.
I know, but you could see the sensitivity here. He's just like, hey, this is not something that we just threw together. But even if they had, it would be totally understandable. As the coach, he's got an issue within his locker room here, unlike one that I've seen in a long time. So that's why we're going to have Nate Boyer call in just a minute here, because Nate's the one who, as you know, has had several tours of duty overseas, as he would go back and forth between being a walk-on on the University of Texas football team and then on the front lines of fighting for our country.
Yeah, he'd go back and forth between seasons.
Over and over again. And Nate was the guy, and it's been 3 years or 4 years, because it was in 2016 when Steve Weich, my colleague from the NFL Network and NFL Media Group, went to a preseason game in Santa Clara and noticed Colin Kaepernick sitting during the national anthem, which apparently Kaepernick had begun doing prior to Steve Weich noticing this. And Steve went up to Kaepernick after the game and asked him about it, and Kaepernick told him, yeah, that's on purpose, and explained why he's doing it, because he wanted to bring focus to all of these issues. He didn't say, screw the military. I hate the United States of America. I hate my country. No, he hates what's happening in his country, and was using his First Amendment rights to do this. And he's doing it in a peaceful manner. And he has every right to say it, Laura Ingraham, even though he doesn't need to shut up and throw a football or shut up and dribble, as you told LeBron and Kevin Durant should do when they spoke up. But now Drew Brees says something like this, and he does have every right to say it and has every right to believe it. But he's a person, according to Laura, who I used to know years ago, and who I don't recognize anymore, quite honestly. But Drew has every right to say it. I wonder why he's got every right to say it, and he's a person that should be listened to, and LeBron and Kevin Durant should shut up and dribble. I just wonder what's the difference between these goats of their respective sports. I'm just trying to put my finger on it. Wonder what that could be.
Yeah.